Hey folks, Joe with JAC Baseball Collector here, coming back at you with something a little bit different today. Not going to be a card opening video, but we are going to be showing off some cards, as this is going to be the first installment of my divisional preview series over the next few weeks. It's something I've teased on a few of my past videos, and this week I'm going to get into the NL West and the AL West. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, each teams, talk about some of their notable offseason moves, talk about kind of a stud and dud type of section. So, maybe a guy who's kind of the star of the team, or someone, you kind of expect to be their most productive, and then, someone who's kind of a dud, maybe someone we expect to regress, or it's just a total obviously dud on the roster. A prospect to watch, one of the top prospects from the team, someone to get excited about, someone to maybe chase in their Bowman cards of. A bounce back candidate, so like a bounce back guy, a sleeper, or maybe like a breakout candidate, something like that in that vein. And then we'll do a quick over under of wins based off of, I think I used Barstool Sportsbooks over under numbers from sometime last week or something. I don't know if they've moved, but I locked it in to use those numbers. So first time doing something like this. Obviously, like I said, it is a little bit different, but I love talking baseball. I love researching and reading about baseball, and talking players and teams and predictions and all that fun stuff. So really looking forward to this. I hope that the video maybe falls in the kind of 20-30 minute range. So obviously we'll see how this one goes, since it's the first time doing it, and I'm sure we'll have a few little growing pains here as I get used to the cadence. All right, first up, we're going to have the basement dweller of the National League West. It's going to be the Colorado Rockies. As far as off-season moves go, they made absolutely none. I don't think they made a single notable move in the off-season. Nothing I could find. I do remember reading a few times throughout the winter that the team literally spent, I think, $0 on net or something like that, or some, astronomically low number. It was just, an absolutely embarrassing offseason, especially after signing Chris Bryant last year and seeing if, if that team could start going in a different direction. That'll segue us right into their stud. I mean, and it has to be Chris Bryant, right? I mean, there's no one else. And sorry, getting a little bit of that glare. We'll make sure to get that a little bit better. But it can't really be anyone else on this team. There's quite obviously no other like very, very good players. He signed that big money contract last year before the 2022 season, but he really couldn't stay on the field. He couldn't stay healthy. But before that, he was typically a pretty good player, right? He was a 250 OPS guy, but he's on the wrong side of 30 now, and at this point, he just needs to take advantage of course. He signed the big money deal. He's kind of in a black hole of an organization, unfortunately. I think, myself, and I think everyone's kind of surprised he signed there. But at this point now, you just got to take advantage of cores, try to have a productive 30s. He got paid, but, this is a guy who's got to figure it out and, try to get this team back to a little bit of relevance, as I try to make sure we don't have super glare action going on there. All right, the next is my dud of the Rockies. So this is a guy who I expect to kind of regress or, be on the wrong side of his career, not really be bouncing back. And for me, that's Charlie Blackmon. So this is a Topps Finest refractor. I've got a Blackmon from a few years ago. He used to be a lock for 300. Chuck Nasty, really fun player to watch. He's got the big beard. He's kind of, reckless abandon out there on the field. But he's just been in steady decline the past few years. And now at 36 years old, I think his goose is just absolutely cooked. So don't really expect too much more out of Charlie Blackmon in his career. He's had himself a really nice career, but I think he's pretty much at the end of the road here. All right, next is going to be a prospect to watch. So the Rockies farm system is the 12th ranked system, according to Keith Law. So I used his rankings just as a way to kind of keep it consistent. Keith Law on The Athletic. He's not, my favorite, but, he does decent work. So the 12th ranked system, which is a pretty decent system, and the prospect I'm going to call out isn't their technically top ranked prospect, because I'm going to get to that guy in a minute as part of a different category. But I'm going to call out Zach Veen. So Zach Veen, and this is his nice Panini Prism, one of the retail parallels, really sharp looking card. But Veen is the 37th ranked prospect on average right now. So between Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, and I think Baseball Prospectus was the other one that I looked at. Between all three of their ranking lists, he averages out to the 37th overall prospect in the top 100 list. So this guy I know is one of my buddy over there, LSU Maniacs, absolute favorites. He's this big, lanky, left-handed bat, drafted 9th overall out of high school. And, the reason I chose this card instead of like a Bowman or some of the others is it just shows how long and lanky he actually is. I mean, you can just see how long his legs are. He's super tall, super long. He uses that big long bat. And when he came up, when he first got drafted, he tore up A ball. Struggled in Double A last year a little bit, but pretty small sample size. But he was really good in the Arizona Fall League. He's been really, really good in spring training so far this year. I think he has 7 stolen bases or something already. He's really tearing it up. So he's doing quite a good job. I don't think he's going to make the team out of camp, but they're so bagged that who knows? I mean, but he barely played in Double A, so probably not. But he's just a really well-rounded, athletic right field type, who's gonna just steal a ton of bags. He's got some pop, and when he grows, when he fills into that body, he's really gonna have a lot more pop, and especially when he gets into cores. So he's someone I have definitely some hopes for. I think he could be a really, really good player. We get him up there. Of course, my backlight is just not cooperating with me. There we go. All right, next I'm going to do a kind of sleeper breakout candidate. So I'm not going to do a bounce back one for the Rockies, but I'm going to do a sleeper breakout guy. One that I just wanted to call out off to the side was Brendan Rodgers. He was actually my original guy on this list before he went down for the entire season. So this is his first Bowman, I think, refractor. I think this is his first Bowman refractor. He was a guy who I had on my breakout list. I thought he might have a pretty nice season. He's been kind of a middling average player, really good defender, but just not too much with the bat. But I thought, he might finally come into his own. But that obviously did not come to fruition. So what I did was I bumped this guy out of the prospect section, and I put him as a potential breakout candidate, and it's Ezekiel Tovar. So I think this is actually the only card he has that's a base card that I'm aware of. This is from Topps Heritage 2022. I think he has a Topps or a Bowman Chrome autograph, but I don't think he had a base Bowman Chrome, at least a first that I was aware of. So he's actually the 21st ranked prospect on average. So he's a more highly ranked prospect than Veen currently. But he's a really, really good shortstop. He's an absolute magician with the glove. And he's going to be probably the starting shortstop for the Rockies. Higher than probably, frankly, in 2023. So he's only 21 years old. So, he's still got to continue to develop, but on a team this bad, he's going to have an opportunity to do so. That's for sure. So he could be a 2020 guy in cores. I mean, he has a ton of speed. As his body fills out, he's going to develop the pop. And, obviously with cores with that thin air, he's going to be able to pop some balls out of the park. So definitely a guy to keep an eye out for, and someone maybe to snag up some Bowmans of, and to just snag up in your fantasy drafts this year, because he could do some damage. So as far as over-unders go, their over-under was 66.5 wins. They won 68 games last year, and honestly, they got worse. So I'm going under 66.5 for the Rockies this year. All right, let's clear out the showcase and move on to our next team. Our next team is going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks. So this is definitely an interesting team, one that was, a little bit harder to handicap, but one that had a particularly interesting offseason and a lot of exciting young talent coming up through the ranks. So as far as additions go to the team this offseason, they had a few pretty good ones. I mean, it was really highlighted by Gabriel Moreno. I'm sorry, I keep getting that glare. I'm going to take this over to the side a little bit, try to avoid that. But Gabriel Moreno is the top-rated catching prospect in baseball. So it's him and Francisco Alvarez from the Mets. But he is an absolute stud. I think he's going to be a great hitter. I showcased him in my rookie recap video for Topps Series 1. He has a rookie card in 2023 Topps Series 1. But he was the kind of the top guy that they acquired this offseason in the Dalton Varsho trade. And just, to make mention of him and just to show off a pretty sharp-looking card, I have this Dalton Varsho refractor chrome autograph rookie card from them, which, he's now with the Blue Jays, and he was traded for multiple players. Man, that glare's killing me. He was traded for multiple players in that Moreno deal. One of the other guys traded for him was Lourdes Gurriel. And then separately from that, even they also acquired Kyle Lewis. They picked up Evan Longoria, and then a few other kind of, generic starting pitchers. So, moving on from the offseason moves, I'm going to get into the stud and dud section. The number one guy on this team, by far, I think he immediately just propels himself to the best player. He had a cup of coffee, more than a cup of coffee with the team last year, and he was super impressive. He's been tremendous in spring training, is this guy right here. It's Corbin Carroll. So here's his first Bowman paper. I couldn't find a chrome. I don't know if I have one. But he's the second ranked prospect in all of baseball right now, behind pretty much just Gunnar Henderson in most places. And like I said, I think he immediately becomes the best player on this team. He had only 142 minor league games, and he had 77 extra base hits, 52 stolen bases, and an OPS over 1,000. I mean, he's turning heads everywhere he, at every level he gets to. He turned heads in his 100 at bats last year in the bigs, and I mean, he's the odds-on favorite for the National League Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's an absolute speedster. He's one of the fastest players I think most people have ever seen, and he's going to be the best player on this team and provide an absolute spark for that lineup all throughout the year. As far as duds go, I'm going to have to go with, a guy I mentioned as far as a pickup from the team goes, and it's going to be Kyle Lewis. So he's not going to play an outsized role, obviously, unless there's an injury on the team, and this is a nice Stadium Club Chrome orange, number 25/25. But he's not a guy I ever really believed in. He got really popular after that 2020 shortened season when he won Rookie of the Year. His stuff was pretty expensive for a while, and folks thought he was going to be like a next big, Seattle outfielder. Obviously, there was a different guy who took over that next big Seattle outfielder spot this past year, but he's never a guy I got super excited about for whatever reason, and he's been battling the injury bug, and even when he has played, he just hasn't been particularly impressive. So when he got traded to the Diamondbacks, he, maybe it'll be a fresh start for him, but he's most likely going to be a fourth outfielder. So unless someone goes down, he's going to have, minimal playing time. But, he had himself that nice rookie year. Hopefully some folks are able to cash in on him at the right time. Next is going to be the prospect to watch from the Arizona Diamondbacks. So I didn't include Corbin Carroll there because I'm considering him, part of the team. He's just going to be a starter this year. They do have the 4th ranked system, which is pretty high. They have a really strong system, so that probably is inclusive of the fact that they have Corbin Carroll still technically as a prospect, but they have a number of other really good guys. I mean, I'm going to showcase Jordan Lawler. I mean, seems like a no-brainer to me. This is his first Bowman refractor. He's the 16th ranked prospect on average, drafted 6th overall out of high school in 2021, and he's just a true 5-tool shortstop. Just an absolute stud all around. And in his first full year in the minors, he had 16 homers and 40 steals. So, he's expected to reach the majors next year. I think is the expectation is that he probably busts in sometime in 2024, most likely not at all in 2023. But, if he has himself a monster campaign and there's some sort of injury to Ketel Marte or, which is an outside of the realm of possibility or something like that, could they fast track him? Potentially, but I think most likely we're going to see this guy in 2024 for service time reasons and whatever else. Last guy to showcase here is going to be another breakout candidate, so not a bounce back guy. Maybe you would classify him as a sleeper. It's Jake McCarthy. So he's, someone who I think is kind of still relatively unknown. He was from that 2022 rookie class. I'm sure folks pulled a lot of his rookie cards during, their Topps openings and other product openings last year. And never really thought twice about him. And maybe he's not the most collectible guy in the world. Obviously, he plays in Arizona, all that. But he had a really solid rookie year. He only played about 100 games. He had 2.5 WAR. And he was, pretty much through the minors, kind of an overlooked prospect. No one ever really thought twice about him, like I said. But he's going to slot into the middle of that D-backs order, most likely. I don't know if it's 3, 4, 5, 6. Wherever he is, he's going to slot into that middle of that order somewhere. And he's going to reap a lot of the benefits of the fact that you're going to have Corbin Carroll setting the table and just being a spark at the top of that lineup. So somebody's going to be cleaning up, Corbin Carroll and some of these other guys setting the table quite a bit. So that's your Arizona Diamondbacks. As far as over-under goes, they have an over-under of 75.5 wins. Last year, they won 74 games. Zip says they're going to be about 500. I think some of the other places might have had them a little bit below. But between Corbin Carroll, the spark he adds, all these solid young players, I mean, I'm a fan of the young guys. I think that they, add a different element to the game. So I'm going to go over 70. What would I say? 75.5. Yeah, I'm going to go over 75.5. For the D-backs, and I think, they could definitely surprise some people this year. All right. So that's 2 teams in the books for the NL West. Moving on to the next one in the line is going to be the San Francisco Giants. So San Francisco had definitely a bit of a weird offseason. So they, as far as additions and subtractions go, they added Ross Stripling, Sean Manaea, Mitch Haniger, Michael Conforto, and Jock Peterson. So some pretty like respectable names there, to be sure. But they also tried their darndest to get Aaron Judge and Carlos Correa, and they basically were on the precipice of signing both of them before it fell apart. So I mean, that's a pretty, you know, demoralizing thing to have happen to a franchise, I think, in an off season where they thought they were going to turn the corner and that they were like going to be these big spenders who were going to make all these big moves. And the biggest name they probably added was like Michael Conforto, who hasn't played baseball in over a year. Their losses definitely outweighed, in my opinion, their adds. So I mean, their big loss, which leaves a big hole at the top of their rotation, as I'm fumbling his card here, was Carlos Rodon. So here's his first Bowman Chrome back when he was with the White Sox. Leaves a big hole at the top of their rotation, and it puts a lot of pressure on Logan Webb to be an ace. And Logan Webb is a guy who has been pretty good, and I'm going to put this over here because it's a little less glary. Logan Webb's been a guy who's obviously been pretty good, and he's going to be, the segue into the next piece of this. In Stud and Dud, he is their best player. So who's the best? When I was looking at this and I said to myself, who is the best player on the Giants? I did make a note for myself that said, was it Arson Judge? The old joke of, John Heyman getting that tweet totally wrong, getting his name wrong, saying that the Giants were about to sign him. Was it Correa? No, he didn't sign there either. So it falls back to Logan Webb. No one else's name really jumped out at me on that roster, to be perfectly honest. And Logan Webb has kind of been really sneaky, like an ace quality pitcher. I mean, he had back-to-back ace quality seasons. He had a sub-3 ERA. But now he's got to be the ace. He can't be the number 2 guy anymore. You're not falling back on Rodon to be your stopper. Logan Webb is the stopper now. So, he does have a high ground ball rate, which is good for a guy with a lower strikeout rate like he has. But, that could also, lead to problems if, without the shift or more balls going to squeak through, things along those lines. But, he's got the stuff and he's got the makeup to be very good. The question is, does he really solidify himself as a bona fide ace? All right, as far as the dud goes, and the guy, a guy to expect maybe some regression from, is for me it's going to be Jock Peterson. So Jock Peterson's another guy kind of similar to Kyle Lewis. Obviously, has had a much more successful career than Kyle Lewis, but just another guy who I personally was never the biggest fan of in the world. But the Giants are counting on him to be, the cleanup guy. They're counting on him to clean up for that lineup, to be a big productive hitter right in the middle of the order. But, he didn't really have a good 2020 and 2021 before, this big bounce back last year in San Francisco. But I don't know. Like I said, I just expect him to regress. All of his pre-2020 value came from, like I said, he had the bad year in 2020, the bad year in 2021, and all of his value kind of before that as a hitter came from, big power. He's not an average guy. I don't even think he's a great on-base percentage guy, but all his value came from hitting the long ball, hitting for power, and San Francisco is just not the park for that. It's just a very hard park to hit home runs in. I mean, obviously, if you're not named Barry Bonds, right? So, or John Dowd, I guess. So, some people get that joke. But, I just think that he's a guy who's due for a serious regression, and it's going to be trouble for the Giants if they're expecting him to be a super productive cleanup hitter, in my opinion. All right, prospect to watch. So the Giants system, they are the 18th ranked farm system in the big, so kind of that middle of the road, that middle, 11 to 20 range. But the guy to watch is, a guy we've heard his name a lot of dating back to 2019 Bowman, where he was a big chase, and that's going to be Marco Luciano. So Marco Luciano is currently a top 25 prospect. He's actually slipped a little bit from prior years. He was really highly regarded a few years ago. I think he might have even gotten into the top 10 at one point, if I'm not mistaken. I could have that wrong. But he slipped back a little bit, but he's still in the top 25, so it's not like he's fallen completely off. But he is just 21 years old. He's the former top international signing for an infielder in the year that he signed. But he just, he hasn't been able to climb his way out of A-ball yet. So that's probably why he's dropped back a little bit. Obviously, he lost the year with the COVID season, like a lot of these guys did. But the fact that he wasn't one of these draftees from 2022 or 2021, he came in 19, and then he lost that whole year in 2020. That's very hard for some of these guys to bounce back from. But he's got an incredible amount of talent. He's got unbelievable bat speed. Whenever I hear people talk about that, I think about how they used to talk about how Clint Frazier had like this godlike bat speed, and obviously that didn't do anything for him. But this guy's obviously a much more talented player than Clint Frazier ever was. So he's got this incredible bat speed. He just got to stay within himself, get a little bit of plate discipline. And if he was able to do that, he's going to have himself a very bright future for the Giants. All right, next up is I'm going to have a bounce back candidate and then a potential breakout candidate from the Giants. So we'll get that cooking here. My first bounce back candidate, this is a no-brainer, right? It's going to be Michael Conforto. He got his first Bowman Chrome here. He wasn't able to play all of 2022 due to an injury. So he was out with, I think it was a shoulder problem, and just nobody would sign him. He couldn't pass a physical. He might have been demanding too much money for a guy who was coming off this injury, and he just had to sit out the entire season. Giants took a chance on him this offseason. But before all his injuries, he had some really strong seasons with the Mets. He was a really, really good player, even so far as, dating back to 17, 18 range. There were people talking about who was the better right fielder, who was the better outfielder in New York, Michael Conforto or Aaron Judge. Obviously, we know how that ended up turning out, but this is a guy who has a ton of talent. So he doesn't, he might not be like an all-star caliber player, but I expect him to be, someone who is, having a bounce back and could potentially be a comeback player of the year candidate after having to sit out all of 2022. All right, last guy who I have here, he's going to be my breakout candidate for the Giants, is Joey Bart. So somebody from that 2021 fairly weak rookie class, as far as the hobby goes. There wasn't a lot of names in there who have really panned out super strong yet. But this is, a former top 100 prospect. He raked all throughout the minors. He was supposed to be an offense first catcher. He was the heir apparent to Buster Posey. So that hasn't really panned out yet. Posey retired after the 2021 season. Bart got a chance last year. He didn't play so great. He hasn't made the big offensive splash I think that folks and, the Giants obviously would have liked. He was a big Bowman chase in that 2019 class again, I think similar to Luciano. I think that was his year. I think it was 2019. But 2023, this is probably his last chance. This is his last chance to make that splash with the Giants and solidify himself as their catcher of the future. So, I always like to give guys the benefit of the doubt that they're going to bet on themselves and that they're going to deliver. So hopefully Bart could be that guy and he can do what the Giants expected him to do, taking over for Buster Posey. All right, Giants over-under. They have over-under of 79.5 wins. I think they won 81 last year. I think they are going to be under 79.5. So I do think that they got a little bit worse. I look at this roster, you're going to be missing Carlos Rodon. They missed out on all those big free agent signings, so that's, like I said, that's pretty demoralizing. But I just look up and down this roster, and I'm just, thoroughly unimpressed. I just, there's some decent names. You have your Webbs, you have Peterson, Conforto. These are, okay names, but I don't know. It just doesn't, I just don't like this team really at all. I think that they're going to struggle this year. I think Webb might have himself a decent season, but it's going to be a lot on his shoulders. So they are going to be, to me, under 79.5. All right, 2 teams to go. This is definitely going a little bit longer than I anticipated. I hope you guys are enjoying, and I hope I'm not blinding you with that glare. I'm going to have to adjust my backlight after this video for the next one. Hopefully I get that right. So, I really, appreciate you guys sticking around. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I will hopefully see you down in the comments, but we'll get to that at the end. All right, next up, we have the San Diego Padres, a very exciting team, moving and grooving for sure this offseason. They made a ton of offseason moves. They had a lot of turnover on the team, but I think, largely for the better. So their big offseason move, obviously, was signing this guy, Jonathan Scope. No, I'm kidding. It was Xander Bogaerts, who they signed from the Red Sox. Obviously, he was a free agent. They signed him. Big time shortstop, probably a top 5 or so shortstop in the game. Man, we'll put him over here. Probably a top 5 or so shortstop in the game. And he's, just going to be a huge lift for them. I mean, they had obviously already Tatis at shortstop, didn't play at all in 2022. They had Kim playing at shortstop. He's going to move over to second base. So that's just really going to solidify their infield, and it's going to allow them to do some, some nice things with moving Tatis into the outfield and other things that just makes their lineup so much better. So in addition to Bogarts, they also signed, some other guys around the edges like Seth Lugo, who's gonna become a starting pitcher. So he was a reliever, I believe, with the Mets for a bunch of years, but he's actually, I think, naturally a starter. So he's gonna become a starting pitcher and get himself stretched out. They signed Nelson Cruz to be their DH, so he's kind of like the ageless wonder with about 460 homers. I think he's just trying to play as long as he possibly can and maybe reach 500, but we'll see if he ever gets there. I think he's like 43 now or something. They signed Michael Wacha. They signed Matt Carpenter to fill in until Ruiz comes back, and then they also spent a ton of money extending Yu Darvish and Manny Machado. So they spent hundreds of millions of dollars extending both of those guys for a number of years going forward. I think Machado signed definitely a double digit, more than a 10-year deal, I believe, and then Darvish signed maybe a 6-year extension until he's into his 40s. So two really nice extension. They've definitely solidified this team, and they're no doubt going for broke. As far as losses go, they lost a handful of pretty notable players. No one that I think that they're gonna really miss. Josh Bell is probably the best of that bunch. Sean Manaea, as we said, he went to the Giants. Brandon Drury, who had a nice season for them last year. Mike Clevenger's found himself in a little bit of trouble. Will Myers, and then Jurick Profar, who's still sitting out on the free agency market trying to find himself a home. So moving into our stud and dud section, we've got, I think the stud to me is obvious. I mean, obviously there's so many great players on the Padres now. They have so much good young talent between Bogarts and, Tatis when he gets back, but we'll get to him and, some of these others. But to me, it's still Juan Soto. I mean, this one's a no-brainer to me. Here's a nice Juan Soto rookie card from, I think this is the, oh God, I forget what the name of this set was. But he had a down year last year, what I think would be considered a down year by Juan Soto standards, and he had a 149 OPS plus. So for anyone who's not familiar with OPS plus, a 100 is league average, and each point above that is basically your percentage above or below average. So at 149, he was basically 49 percentage points better than the average player, which is just astronomically good, and that was his down year. I mean, that was a kind of a, quote, bad year for him. He's simply the most disciplined hitter on the planet. I don't know if I've ever seen a hitter quite as disciplined as him, other than Barry Bonds. And he should be, in my opinion, the MVP favorite going into the season. In a lineup where he's protected all the way around, he's gonna probably not see too many good pitches to hit, frankly, but maybe he's gonna have to, just simply because he's gonna have Machado around him and Bogarts around him and Tatis around him, and I'm sure I'm even forgetting somebody else who's pretty good on the team, but to me, he's the MVP favorite going into the season. What's pretty interesting about him, I wanted to actually talk about him a little bit projecting forward throughout the rest of his career, is that he only needs to average, if he plays until he's 40 years old, which might be asking a lot. I don't know if guys are going to keep still be doing that, but let's say he does. He's only, I think, 23 or 24 still. He's been in the league already a handful of years. If he averages 140 hits and 22 home runs, which for a guy of his caliber is not asking for a lot, he reaches 3,000 hits and 500 homers. So, this could be a guy that we're looking at. I think 3,000 hits, that's always going to be tough. He doesn't really get a lot of hits. He does, but he doesn't because he walks so much. But 22 homers a year on average for the next, 15 years or whatever it is for a guy like this who could easily hit 40 a year. I mean, he could be looking at being a 600 home run guy if he stays healthy. The other thing he might even challenge is Barry Bonds' walk record. I don't have the numbers jotted down here, but he walks just so much that if he averages something like 100 and some odd walks a year, 115 or whatever it is, I think he walks on average like 150 now. He could be pushing that Barry Bonds number, which I think a lot of people thought was a number that would never be broken. So Juan Soto is a guy I honestly can't speak highly enough of, as you could probably tell. And like I said, I think he's going to be the favorite for the MVP this year. All right, as far as the Padres dud goes, their guy I'm expecting regression for, or maybe to turn into a pumpkin, if you will, is Jake Cronenworth. It actually pains me to say this. He was a guy who I was thinking about maybe saying might have a little bit of a bounce back year, but looking more closely, reading on him a little bit, I got to put him in this category. He's declined every year he's been in the league so far. So I think he came into the league, I think it was in 2020 COVID season. He had a pretty nice rookie campaign, and he's just slowly kind of gotten worse as the league has figured him out or figured out his swing. His hard hit rate has gone down. He's not hitting the ball as hard as he used to, and he's hitting more fly balls, but less of them are going over the fence. So obviously, if you're hitting balls in the air that are going to be more easily caught by the outfielders, that's just not good. So between heart rate going down, fly balls that aren't going out of the park, and his K rate rising, it's just a really bad trend for Cronenworth, and I think that it's probably going to continue. So not necessarily the type of production that you want to get out of your first baseman, which is where he's going to play now with Bogarts at short and Kim at second. But I think he's probably going to become, if you're talking about that OPS plus number, I think he was floating just over 100 last year. He's probably going to start, if the trend continues, beginning to dip down below that 100 level, which will definitely not be good for him. So hopefully he can turn it around, but he's a guy who I don't like the trend lines on. All right, prospect to watch for the Padres. So they have the 24th ranked farm system, so not a particularly great or deep farm system, but they do have some really good guys, obviously, at the top of the system. One guy I do want to call out, just because he is a local product here from where I'm at in New Jersey, is Jay Groom, who's had himself a really nice spring training. He was a pitcher drafted by the Red Sox. He's from down the shore here in Jersey. Didn't really pan out that great for the Red Sox. Didn't have himself a great minor league career there. The COVID season sent him back. I think he had an injury. They let him go, and now he's having a really strong spring for the Padres, so I just wanted to call him out separately. But the guy to showcase is this guy. It's another no-brainer. I know I'm using that phrase a lot, but it's Jackson Merrill. He's the 18th ranked prospect on average, really highly ranked, having himself a tremendous spring. I actually just sold his one of his first autos to Filmington, so I'm hoping, Phil, you can get a Gem Mint 10 on that one when you send it off to wherever you get it graded from. But this guy is definitely a stud. He uses the entire field. He has the potential to be a high average guy. I think in the minors he has some ridiculously high average. I forget what the exact number was. I didn't write it down, but he has a ton of potential. He just, like I said, he sprays the ball over the field. He runs well. He plays pretty good defense. But the question becomes now, like, where does he fit? Right? He's drafted as a shortstop. They have Bogarts here for like 13 years or whatever the contract there was. So where does he fit now? Does he shift over to second base? Does he become an outfielder? Does he become trade bait that allows them to upgrade somewhere else? These are all very good problems to have for the Padres, but especially after this spring training that he's having thus far, he's definitely a guy who's going to, continue having people talk. So whether he ends up on another team, or he ends up moving to a different position for the Pods, he's most certainly going to make his presence known in the major leagues, in my opinion. All right, bounce back candidate. I think there's only one answer here for the Padres, and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. Didn't play all of 2022, had some injuries, had the suspension for PEDs. Say what you will about that whole situation, but this just seems self-explanatory. He's going to get himself back on the field by the end of April. Obviously, if he could stay healthy, he is just one of the best, most exciting players, a perennial MVP candidate in the majors. Or he's a perennial MVP candidate, and he's one of the best, most exciting players in all of the majors. I mean, all the BS aside, the fact remains the same. His prices are down in the hobby. Maybe not drastically, but down enough that, if you think he's going to bounce back like I do, he might be someone that you're maybe looking ahead to invest in the short term, so that when he comes back and he has his first, 2 home run games and things go crazy, that's a guy you can look to pounce on. All right, definitely going on a little long, so I apologize for the long video, but I hope you guys are enjoying the content. Let's get into the last team in the division, which is the LA Dodgers. As you can see, their hat sitting here in the background. Every year, the best team in this division. They spend the most money. They win the most games. And you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. I forgot to do over-under for the Padres. I'm actually going to do that really quickly, so I apologize. Over-under, they have 92.5 wins was their over-under number. They won 89 last year. And I'm going to go with the over. I actually think that they have a chance potentially to pass the Padres or pass the Dodgers this year, win the West. Especially with Tatis back, now with Bogarts, Machado solidified, you got Darvish, all the great names that are on that roster. I think that this is their time to shine. I won't say it's now or never because they have a lot of young players. They're going to have a pretty large window, but I do think that this is It's been a few years that they've been knocking at the door, and I think this is maybe finally their time. So I'm definitely over 92.5 for them. All right, now on to the Dodgers. Sorry for that little delay. Like I said, they're the kind of perennial, the powerhouse of this division. It's hard to bet against them, even though I do like the Padres personally this year. But let's take a look at this Dodgers roster. So as far as offseason moves go, they made a few decent additions. I think they're really positioning themselves to make a serious run at Ohtani, so they didn't spend like they have in past years. They had a J.D. Martinez short-term contract. They had a Noah Syndergaard and David Peralta. I mean, those are the most notable names there. Like I said, really positioning themselves for Ohtani in the future. Their losses, they had some pretty notable losses. I mean, they lost Trey Turner, who's one of the most exciting and, electric players in the game today. If you've ever seen him play both offense, running the bases, especially defense, whatever. I mean, he's a guy who could do it all, hitting for a little bit of power, stealing bases, playing sharp defense. So he's definitely going to be a guy they miss. They also lost Cody Bellinger. I really just wanted to show this card off, frankly. It's a nice rookie refractor from Chrome. Not a guy who's been very good since he won the MVP a few years ago. I think he's batted under 200. But he's, he was kind of a face of that team. I think he was a guy that his teammates liked. I don't have any evidence of that, like inside information or anything. But he's he's definitely a guy that, was a staple on that team. So, he may be missed. At the very least, he played good defense, even though he wasn't really hitting. They also lost guys like Justin Turner, who actually just got hurt today. Looked pretty gross. Tyler Anderson, who had a nice breakout season for them. Andrew Haney, and Craig Kimbrell. It's also going to hurt them that they have both Gavin Lux and Walker Buehler out for the year. So two guys they were counting on as I don't think they were counting on Buehler this year. I think they knew he was going to be out with the Tommy John, but Gavin Lux, who was going to be the starting shortstop. Getting into kind of the analysis of the team, stud and dud and all that, their stud remains Mookie Betts. So I actually pulled this out of a rookie card explosion box a few weeks ago. I really just loved the look of this card, so I absolutely wanted to show it off. But Mookie Betts is still the best player on this team. I think even when Trey Turner was there, and some of these other guys, I think Betts, was the guy. He's the guy. He's an all-around stud. He's probably on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He's still chasing that 2018 MVP season, like the production that he had there. He had a 10.7 WAR season. On average since then, he's only had around an average of 6 WAR every season, which is still nothing to scoff at by any stretch. But, he's not, it's not that, that 2018 year where he really just went absolutely bananas. But he still had 2 top 5s in the MVPs since then, or in the past, few years. He's a Gold Glove defender. He plays a little bit of second once in a while when they need him. He's a great defensive right fielder. He has silver sluggers galore. So he's still their stud. He's going to be in the running for an MVP pretty much every year. As far as their dud goes, it's one of the guys I just mentioned that they brought in the offseason. It's J.D. Martinez. So, he's on the back end of his career. I think he's 37 or 38. He's up there. I'm not even going to look at the back of this card to see if it has a date of birth. But he's been declining pretty much every year since 2018. So his OPS plus has fallen from a peak of 173. So if you remember, he's at 73 points above the average player, down to 139, down to 128, down to 17, with just decreasing power all along the way. And, he was playing in Fenway, which is a, pretty easy place to hit for power for a big right-handed hitter like them. But I think, his bat speed is slowing. And he's just on that downward trend. So I expect that trend to continue, and he's just, to me, not going to be a really reliable middle of the lineup hitter anymore. So if that's what they're expecting him to be, I just think that they're going to be really disappointed this year. All right, prospect to watch. Prospect to watch is going to be Diego Cartaya. So the Dodgers not only have the deepest pockets and are one of the best teams in the league, but they also have the #1 ranked farm system. So no surprise there. They're always just churning out good young talent. Absolutely star-studded farm system they got. So Diego Cartaya, he is the top prospect of the top farm system. He ranks 17th overall in the top 100 on average. He's a stud from Venezuela. He actually gets a lot of comparisons to Salvador Perez, who's a fellow Venezuelan. But people actually project him, they think, to be a little bit better than Perez even. I think he's going to be a better defender, but he should hit fairly comparably. And obviously, as we know, Perez is an absolute stud at the plate. So he's probably going to make his debut sometime in 2023, but there's not really a need to rush him. He's a catcher. There's not really a need to rush him into the bigs with Will Smith blocking him anyhow. But we'll obviously see what happens. Injuries happen, especially at the catching position. If he's just, making too much noise at the minor league level and he forces their hand, he might have to, might have to force his way into that lineup, and the Dodgers will figure out what to do. It's definitely a good problem for them to have. All right, let's close it out with the Dodgers bounce back candidate. I'm going to show the bounce back candidate to be Max Muncy, and we got this nice orange. I seem to pull a lot of orange chrome refractors out of Stadium Club Chrome, don't I? Max Muncy, to me, is a solid bounce back candidate for the Dodgers this year. He's going to be playing third base for them. And the reason for this is probably stupid, but he basically has an every other season trend going. In 2019 and 2021, he hit 250 with an 890 OPS, 35 homers, 95 RBIs on average between the two seasons. That was basically the equivalent of what his seasons were. In 2020 and 2022, he hit under 200, like 195, low on base percentage, 95 OPS plus. So, not a well below average, but a below average, basically offensive player. So I'm just going to go with this every other year trend, basically. So I'm going to say he bounces back. Maybe he's not as off the wall as he was in 19 or 21 because those are really strong seasons, but I think he has himself a nice bounce back season. He certainly won't be as bad as last year, and he will man the hot corner very nicely for the Dodgers this season. All right, over-under time, 96.5 wins. They won 111 games last year. This is probably going to be my biggest hot take in any of these videos, is I'm actually going to predict them to be under 96.5. Really hard to predict that a team gets 15 games worse, especially one with as much talent and as much, star power and deep pockets as the Dodgers. But, I think that their lineup is worse. Their rotation is worse. Their bullpen might be worse. I think they just kind of got weaker all around with some of the guys that they lost, some of the injuries that they've sustained, and the fact that they're, like I said, positioning for Ohtani. I think that they take a step back, and I think that some of the other teams in the division, like the D-backs and the Padres being better, are just going to give them a run for their money. Not necessarily, supplant them, but they're going to be tougher outs than they were in the past, basically. All right, that's all I got. I can't believe this video's gone on for over 40 minutes. So if anyone actually stuck around to the end, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to become more efficient with these as I go on, but I am an AL guy, so I hope my AL videos don't go a little bit even longer because I, just know the league a little bit better. But, like I said, if you made it this far, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. I hope you like these kinds of videos and find them fun and informative. And, just you guys love talking baseball as much as I do. So if you do, please, comment down below. Let me know what you think of the NL West, any predictions you have, any hot takes. I'd love to interact back and forth with you guys. Otherwise, subscribe. We'll have the 250 sub giveaway coming up soon. I did hit that number, so we're going to probably run the giveaway over this weekend. All right, folks, thank you again, and the best is yet to come. Take care. Bye-bye.